Joshua was a rising star in the gospel music scene, known for his powerful voice and heartfelt lyrics that touched souls. People admired him, not just for his talent, but for his deep faith, which shone through every song he sang. It was at a youth fellowship program that he first met Anita, a young woman with a radiant smile and an aura of grace. Anita wasn't just beautiful. She was kind, devoted, and passionate about helping others. Joshua noticed her in the crowd as she led a prayer session with a voice so soft yet commanding. After the program, he approached her. "You have a gift," he said, his tone sincere. "Your prayers, they felt like a song to my heart." Anita smiled shyly. "Thank you. I've heard your songs too. They're truly inspiring." That moment sparked a connection. They exchanged numbers, and over the weeks, their conversations grew from casual chats about faith to deep discussions about life, dreams, and purpose. Anita became Joshua's confidant, the one who listened when the pressures of fame felt overwhelming. She prayed for him before every performance, reminding him to trust God and stay humble. Joshua, in turn, encouraged Anita to pursue her dream of starting a foundation to help underprivileged children. Their bond blossomed into a relationship that seemed perfect to everyone who saw them. They attended church programs together, shared their testimonies, and often appeared as a team, inspiring young people to follow God. But as their love deepened, cracks began to form beneath the surface. Joshua was not just a singer. He was a man with struggles, insecurities, and a temper that few people knew about. Anita, ever the peacemaker, often found herself calming him down after heated moments. At first, she didn't mind. She believed love meant standing by each other, even in tough times. But as time went on, the arguments started. Small misunderstandings would escalate, leaving Anita drained. Yet she stayed, hoping that prayer and patience would fix things. Friends began to notice Anita pulling away. Her once bright smile seemed dimmer, her voice quieter. When they asked if she was okay, she would always reply, "I'm fine. Joshua is just under a lot of pressure." No one could have imagined that their love story would take a turn so dark, so tragic. As their relationship continued, Anita became more of a shield for Joshua than a partner. She absorbed the brunt of his frustrations, excused his sudden mood swings, and prayed fervently for him to find peace. "You're my rock, Anita," Joshua often told her after their arguments. "I don't know what I'd do without you." His words were sweet, but they came with an unspoken weight, a dependence that left Anita feeling both valued and trapped. The pressures of fame were mounting for Joshua. He had become a household name, with fans praising his talent and calling him a man of God. Yet behind closed doors, the pressure to maintain that image ate away at him. He struggled with feelings of inadequacy, fearing that any mistake would tarnish his reputation. Anita, ever patient, tried to help him. "Joshua, you don't have to carry this burden alone," she would say. "Lean on God, not just your strength." But Joshua didn't always listen. Instead, he often lashed out in anger, blaming Anita for not understanding what he was going through. Their once loving conversations turned into heated arguments. Anita began to feel like she was walking on eggshells, unsure of what might trigger Joshua next. One night, after a particularly heated disagreement, Anita confided in her closest friend, Tola. "I don't know what's happening to us," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "He's not the same Joshua I met. I love him, but I don't know how much more I can take." Tola looked at her with concern. "Anita, love shouldn't hurt like this. You've done your part. Maybe it's time to step back." But Anita shook her head. "He needs me. If I leave, I don't know what will happen to him. I believe he can change." Her words were filled with hope, but Tola couldn't shake the feeling that Anita was holding on to something that might destroy her. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between Joshua and Anita grew. Their public appearances continued to paint a picture of a perfect couple, but those closest to them knew something was wrong. One evening, after a major performance, Joshua and Anita returned home. Joshua had been irritable all night, snapping at Anita over small things. When they got inside, the argument escalated. "You're always trying to control me," Joshua shouted, his voice echoing through the room. "I'm not trying to control you, Joshua," Anita pleaded. "I'm trying to help you before you lose yourself completely." But her words seemed to only fuel his anger. What happened next remains unclear, but by morning Anita's lifeless body lay in the living room. The news spread like wildfire. A gospel singer, someone who sang about God's love, was now being accused of taking the life of the woman who had loved him unconditionally. The morning was quiet, yet the air carried an eerie stillness. Joshua sat on the floor, his head buried in his hands, as police officers moved around the house, piecing together the tragedy that had unfolded just hours before. Anita's body, lifeless and cold, was a stark contrast to the vibrant woman everyone knew. The neighbors, startled by the commotion, gathered outside, whispering in hushed tones. Some refused to believe it. "Joshua, the gospel singer? No, it can't be true," they exclaimed, but the evidence was undeniable. As Joshua was escorted into a police vehicle, his face was a mix of confusion and despair. "It wasn't supposed to end like this," he murmured to himself. "I loved her." Anita's friends and family were inconsolable. Tola, her closest friend, couldn't stop crying. "She stayed because she believed he would change," she said bitterly. "She gave everything for him, but it wasn't enough." The story quickly went viral, dominating social media and news outlets. People were torn. Some defended Joshua, citing the immense pressure he must have been under, while others condemned him for letting his anger destroy the life of the woman who stood by him. "Where was the God he sang about?" one comment read. "How could someone so devoted to spreading love commit such a horrific act?" But behind the noise, deeper questions emerged. How many others are suffering in silence just like Anita did? How many stories are hidden behind the perfect pictures we see online? As investigations continued, new details surfaced. Joshua had been battling private struggles for years, mental health issues, insecurities, and a growing dependence on Anita for emotional support. But instead of seeking help, he had bottled everything up until it exploded in the worst possible way. Meanwhile, Anita's family held a vigil in her honor. Her mother, tears streaming down her face, spoke to the crowd. "My daughter was a light in this world. She believed in love, in forgiveness, and in second chances. But love should never cost you your life." The world began to reflect on the lessons from Anita's story. It wasn't just about Joshua and Anita. It was about all the hidden struggles, the silent cries for help, and the need for open conversations about mental health, relationships, and abuse. The days following Anita's death were filled with chaos and pain. Joshua's arrest shocked the gospel music community, and his devoted fans struggled to reconcile the man they admired with the crime he was accused of committing. Anita's funeral was heartbreaking. The church was packed with friends, family, and even strangers who had been touched by her kindness. Her mother clutched a framed photo of Anita, her trembling hands evidence of the unimaginable loss she felt. "Anita gave her life to love," her mother said through tears during the service. "She believed in second chances, but sometimes love blinds us to danger. We must learn from her story. We must protect ourselves, even from those we love." Meanwhile, Joshua sat in his prison cell, replaying that fateful night over and over in his mind. His lawyer had urged him to stay quiet, but the guilt was overwhelming. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he whispered to no one. "I loved her, I lost control." The investigation uncovered troubling details about their relationship. Anita had confided in a few close friends about Joshua's temper and the arguments that had grown more intense over time. But she had always dismissed the warning signs, believing that love, patience, and prayer would heal the rift between them. She thought she could save him, Tola said in an emotional interview. But some battles aren't ours to fight alone. She gave too much of herself, and he took it all until there was nothing left. Public opinion about Joshua began to shift. While some still sympathized with him, believing he was a man under immense pressure who had made a tragic mistake, others were unforgiving. "Love is not an excuse for violence," one online post read. Anita deserved better. She deserved to live. As the case headed to court, Anita's family vowed to seek justice. Her father, who had remained quiet throughout the ordeal, finally spoke out. "No one should ever have to bury their child. My daughter believed in him, and he betrayed her in the worst way possible. We will fight for her." The trial became a media sensation, with every detail of Joshua and Anita's relationship dissected in the public eye. Joshua's defense team argued that his mental health struggles and the pressures of fame had driven him to a breaking point, but the prosecution painted a different picture. A man who had failed to control his anger and taken the life of an innocent woman. As testimonies from friends, family, and even Joshua himself unfolded, the world was left grappling with hard questions. How can we identify the warning signs of a toxic relationship? What role does mental health play in preventing such tragedies? And how can we ensure that Anita's story is not forgotten? The courtroom was silent as the trial began. Joshua, once the golden voice of gospel music, now sat in the defendant's chair, his face gaunt and filled with regret. Across the room, Anita's family sat together, their grief evident in their tear-streaked faces. The tension was palpable. The prosecution wasted no time painting a vivid picture of the tragic events. "This is not just about a single moment of rage," the prosecutor argued. "This is about a pattern of control, emotional manipulation and violence that ended in the death of a beautiful soul, Anita." Witness after witness took the stand. Anita's friends recounted the changes they had seen in her, the dimming of her once bright spirit, her growing silence, and the excuses she made for Joshua's behavior. Tola's testimony was especially powerful. "Anita was the kindest person I've ever known," she said, her voice trembling. "She believed in love, in forgiveness. But Joshua took advantage of that. She thought she could save him, but in the end he destroyed her." The defense team tried to shift the narrative, arguing that Joshua had been under immense stress and that the incident was an unintentional act, a moment of weakness. They presented evidence of his mental health struggles, calling expert witnesses to explain how fame, pressure, and unresolved trauma could have driven him to act out of character. Joshua himself took the stand, his voice barely above a whisper. "I loved Anita," he said, tears streaming down his face. "She was my everything. That night, I don't even know how it got so out of control. I never wanted to hurt her. I would give anything to take it back." But his words, though heartfelt, did little to comfort Anita's family. Her father, who had remained stoic throughout the trial, finally broke down as Joshua spoke. "You say you loved her," he muttered under his breath, his voice filled with anguish. "But love doesn't kill." As the trial dragged on, the public continued to debate. Some were moved by Joshua's remorse, believing he deserved a second chance. Others stood firmly with Anita's family, demanding justice for a young woman whose life was cut short. Anita's mother took the stand on the final day of the trial. Holding a picture of her daughter, she addressed the court with unwavering strength. "My daughter's life was worth more than this tragedy. She was kind, forgiving, and full of dreams. Joshua took that away. No parent should have to bury their child. I'm here today to ensure that her voice is not silenced forever." The judge's expression remained unreadable as the final arguments were made. As the jury deliberated, the entire nation held its breath, waiting to see how this tragic story would unfold. The courtroom was heavy with silence as the jury returned after hours of deliberation. Everyone sat in tense anticipation, their emotions tangled between justice and sorrow. Joshua sat with his head bowed, his once charismatic presence now a shadow of itself. Across the aisle, Anita's family held hands, bracing themselves for what was to come. The four persons stood, a piece of paper trembling in their hands. "We, the jury, find the defendant." The pause seemed to stretch on forever. "Guilty." Gasps filled the courtroom. Anita's mother broke down into tears, clutching her daughter's photograph as though it was her lifeline. Joshua's face remained unreadable for a moment, and then, as the realization sunk in, he buried his face in his hands and began to sob. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters and supporters had gathered. Some cheered at the verdict, feeling a sense of justice for Anita. Others stood quietly, their faces etched with sadness over how two promising lives had been destroyed. As the legal proceedings concluded, the world shifted its focus from the trial to the lessons it carried. The media buzzed with commentary about the dangers of ignoring red flags in relationships, the importance of mental health awareness, and the cost of unchecked fame and pressure. Tola, determined to honor her best friend's legacy, started a foundation in Anita's name. "This isn't just about Anita," she said during an emotional launch event. "This is about every person suffering in silence, every person trapped in a toxic relationship, and every life that can still be saved." Anita believed in love, but love must never come at the cost of your safety. Joshua, now in prison, began his journey of reckoning. From his cell, he wrote letters filled with remorse, one of which was addressed to Anita's family. "I failed her," the letter read. "She was my light, and I let my darkness consume her. I will carry this burden for the rest of my life." But forgiveness did not come easily. Anita's father, in particular, struggled to move past the pain. "How do you forgive the person who took your child?" he asked in a rare interview. "I pray for strength every day, but the wound is still fresh." Anita's story began to resonate far beyond her community. Survivors of abusive relationships came forward to share their experiences, inspired by her courage and the awareness her tragic end had brought. Her life, though cut short, became a symbol of hope and change. Meanwhile, the gospel community faced its own reckoning. Many artists began openly discussing the pressures they faced, advocating for better mental health resources and accountability within the industry. As the months turned into years, Anita's family continued to heal, though the pain of her absence lingered. Joshua, now serving a lengthy sentence, joined a prison ministry program, using his voice to caution others against the mistakes he had made. But questions still hung in the air. Could this tragedy have been prevented? How many lives are at risk when we ignore the signs of emotional and psychological turmoil? Months turned into years, but the impact of Anita's tragic death never faded. Her family, while forever changed, found ways to honor her memory. The foundation created in her name grew rapidly, becoming a beacon of hope for those trapped in abusive relationships. It offered counseling, safe spaces, and a message Anita would have been proud of. Love should heal, not hurt. Tola, now the face of the foundation, spoke passionately at every event. Anita's story is not just about her death, it's about her life. She loved deeply, gave generously, and believed in second chances. But she also taught us that self-love and safety must come first. That's what we want the world to remember. Meanwhile, Joshua remained in prison, his guilt and grief shaping the man he was becoming. He joined a prison ministry program, using his story to warn others about the dangers of unchecked anger and emotional dependency. "I destroyed the one person who believed in me the most," he said during a sermon to his fellow inmates. "But if my story can save just one life, then maybe some good can come from this pain." His letters to Anita's family continued, but they were rarely answered. For Anita's father, the wound was still too deep. "Forgiveness is a journey," he said in an interview. "Some days, I feel closer to it. Other days, I feel like I'll never get there. But I know Anita would want us to try." The gospel music community, shaken by Joshua's fall from grace, began taking steps to support artists struggling with fame, mental health, and personal pressures. Workshops and counseling services became more common, and a collective commitment to accountability emerged. As time went on, Anita's story became a powerful cautionary tale. Schools, churches, and organizations used her life as an example of the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships, seeking help, and prioritizing self-care. One day, years later, a young woman approached Tola after a foundation event. "I was in an abusive relationship," she said, tears in her eyes. "But hearing Anita's story gave me the strength to leave. I'm alive today because of her." That moment encapsulated everything Anita's family and friends had hoped for, that her life though tragically cut short, would continue to make a difference. In a rare interview from prison, Joshua reflected on the legacy Anita had left behind. "She was the best of us," he said, his voice trembling, "and I destroyed her. But if her story can save others, then maybe she's still shining her light from above." Anita's mother, in her final public statement about her daughter, said it best. "Anita believed in love, in hope, and in healing. She didn't die in vain. Her life was a gift, and through her story, that gift continues to touch lives. Love should never hurt. That's the lesson we must never forget." And so, Anita's light continued to shine, a reminder to the world that even in tragedy, there is the power to inspire change, heal wounds, and save lives. Let Anita's story inspire change and awareness. If this message resonates with you, please share this video to help someone else. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more inspiring stories. Thank you.